Okay, good afternoon, everybody. This is our monthly Housing with Services team meeting for February 2022, and we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining. Oops. And as we always start out our meetings, we'll start out with a prayer. So if you care to join me, please do. First, just kind of take a deep breath and relax. So glorious and blessed God, we place our work and ourselves into your hands. Anoint our creativity, our ideas, our energy, so that even the smallest task may bring you honor. God, when we are challenged, guide us. When we are weary, energize us. May the work that we do and the way that we do it bring hope, life, and courage to all with whom we minister within this organization. Bless our administration with wisdom and discernment, our employees and providers with commitment and compassion, our residents and their families with courage and strength. Rooted in your love, may your face illuminate all activities done in your name. Amen. Okay, so we'll start with transitions. We've got quite a few this month. It's been a busy new year here. So Regina does have an interim. Mary Olson, who's helped us in the past, is helping us again as the interim housing leader for that community. We have a new housing leader for Windermere Way at Shakopee, and her name is Arliss, I don't know if it's Severson or Severson, I think it's Severson. We also have, we're going to see Shakopee a lot in here. We also have an interim director of nursing for both Windermere Way and the Gardens. I just have her down as Windermere Way, but she's also covering the Gardens, and that is our transition nurse, Molly Windruff. And then we have a new housing leader that's been here a couple of weeks, but I don't think I mentioned him yet. Quentin Burzin has jumped right in and he is the executive director over all of Shakopee. So he oversees the nursing home, the Gardens, and Windermere Way. At Living Community in St. Joseph, Missouri, we have Brandy Argbright. Brandy is filling in as the assisted living director of nursing, and she's also functioning as the housing leader. Continuing with transitions, Amy Byram started about 2 weeks ago, as I recall, and she is the St. Joseph's executive director, again, overseeing the nursing home, the housing, and independent living. In this case, I'm also pointing out that Amy, once she gets a chance to be on board, Brandy will step out of the housing administrative role, and Amy will own that directly within that community. So she will be the housing leader moving forward. And then we have Maggie Holmes, who is the interim executive director at White Bear Lake. As Pat retires, she'll be stepping in, and Maggie has been with Benedictine as an interim in several roles. So some of you may know that name. Miranda Sumption is the director of nursing at Evergreen Place. And Laura Graybar is the interim at La Crosse for the assisted living director of nursing. And Humboldt, I haven't had a chance to ask Frank yet who's filling in, but Sia will be leaving Humboldt, so that position will be open at Humboldt. We also have some new RNSs. We have Angie Steinler. Hopefully I don't slaughter these names, and Jill Satcho and Lisa Ramsey. So of the 4 RNSs, 3 are brand new. So we welcome them. And then the new regional support RN is Haley Munson. So lots of changes. We welcome everybody as they start with Benedictine or are interim supporting us at Benedictine. Glad you're here. So as it just took 3 pages to tell you these transitions, we're also changing a little bit in the process of the orientation of people. We do try very hard to get to the communities and to orientate you guys in person. We also recognize that sometimes your schedule, there is a lot that goes into it. There really should be multiple days focused on housing and the processes and systems. And I know that that's a challenge for you guys when you're first starting out and or when you've got a lot going on because you're new. So what we're going to do is we're going to change our orientation process, and we're going to move it from a one-on-one to a centralized group training. As we all know, Zoom is not the ideal way to learn. So we do want it to be face-to-face. So just be aware that what I am going to ask is, and there'll be more information coming out on this, but I am going to ask that the housing leaders at some point in time in the next month or two come to Minnesota, and probably a multi-day training will occur on housing and just a refresher on the processes and systems. And then anybody new starting moving forward would come to Minnesota so that we can kind of do that regroup. We're also going to work with Leslie because I know that there is a DON training that you come to. So working with her to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts, and you guys are getting your time valued. So just switching our strategy to be more in line with what Steve does. Steve brings in the new housing, the executive directors for a group training. Currently, the director of nursing has come for a group training, so we're just getting on to that online. So you will see more about that. One thing for all the states to know, though, is that Minnesota is starting to see their surveys. We've done some mock surveys and feel like we need to help these folks get through. We did a multiple day training on Minnesota assisted living, but again, that was a while ago. Lots of new leaders, so we need to get that training on board. And as soon as that's done, then we'll start with the more global that will include all the states. So more information on that to come. All right, so on to our kind of standard, what we cover, because these are our strategic goals for 2022. The first one is the customer concern database. So we'll look at how that goes in a second. The person-centered care, the person-centered wellness plan, the point of care compliance, and community plan, focus and execute. So at every meeting, we go over how we're doing with all of those things and seeing where you guys are at. So did something a little bit different this month. Took a cue from our compliance report and just did a little bit of an audit, and wanted to show you the results. So I pulled the stats from 10 of you in your customer concern database, and I'll show you what I looked at in a second here. And I looked at, are you using the database? And the good thing is most of you are. Of that 10, 9 out of 10 were actually using it, 1 was not. Is there a sufficient number? So this is kind of an arbitrary thing, because what is a sufficient number? So I just said it's more than 5 in a year. The point of the database is not just to document the reportable things, but basically anything that would come out of your resident council where they're asking for follow-up or input. Anytime a resident shares concerns, that should be put in there. We're looking for patterns and trends. We're not just documenting the most significant thing. So you don't want to wait until it's a formal complaint or a written complaint. You want to look at those concerns that are legitimate and brought forth you in a day-to-day. So for example, one of these communities that had only 2, this one here, I was in the building on a day when there were 2 complaints just in the day that I was there that were brought to the administrator. So that's the kind of thing, like I said, we're looking for trends. So it may be that 2 is a magic number, but when we're seeing 0 or 3, and I looked at a full year timeline. So when we're looking at, 2, 3 in a whole year, that those are the only concerns we're getting, I got to believe we're probably not documenting the concerns in the database. And so in comparison, I pulled one that I'm going to use as our example. And in the last year, this particular community had over 75 entries and was really using this as part of their strategic plan to improve their customer service. So you can see the difference in that. Here's a new community that about August, there was a new leader who started using it, which is great. So there's only 7 there, but you can definitely see that moving forward. Then the other thing that I looked at is there follow-up? Is somebody approving to say that, yes, we got back to these people, and yes, the resolution is something that I can support. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So if you go into customer concerns database, and I am going to pick on Duluth. And where are you? There you go. And you just, yours will pop up to be you. And then I'm going to pick, and I'm going to move it back to 1 as the start date, and assisted living, which Marywood is. And you can see, so what I'd like you to do is, if you're a new leader, go on in, open up the customer concerns database. So you go into eSource and you go into the applications and you just type in concern. This will pop up. It should automatically populate your particular community. And you should see a variety of concerns addressed here. And you should see that they're not only completed, but that somebody has signed off on them. So when I looked at this particular one for Duluth, it is completed and resolved. It's just in process of being signed off. So Duluth is doing a great job, and that's exactly what this database is supposed to be used for. So if you have any questions on how to use that or new to that, give me a call. All right, back to our PowerPoint here. So the next one is improve willingness to recommend. And so,
Hey, Penny,
yes, Pam.
it's Barb from up in Duluth.
Mm-hmm.
So I will just say a couple things on this, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure, please.
So when we're trying to drive willingness to recommend or resident satisfaction, what always seems to come up in almost any survey that we do at any site is communication, follow through, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we really have tried to use the concern database to make sure that we are following up timely. So if you use the concern database, you actually then can create reports on the percentage of the time that you follow up in 24 hours and 3 days, 5 days, whatever it is. And we take those to our quality meeting. So once a quarter, we actually look and talk about this at quality to make sure the database is being used. We look at trends. What are the most, what are the frequent concerns that are being raised? Are we being consistent? We measure our response with responding within the 5 days. So it all goes to quality. That's our way of holding ourselves accountable.
Thank you, Barb. Thank you. Yes, and that's important. We don't want to collect data just for the sake of collecting data. We want you to use it to improve an outcome. And we did decide that at a strategic level, the 2 ways to improve our customer satisfaction is being responsive and just making sure that our customer service is there. And so one of the key pieces is the trends. Also, your concerns, your survey is going to ask for a logbook. And so you want to show that you are watching these things and you are looking at it. And as Barb just referred, here's a surveyor report, as well as the other ones that she was referencing under reports. So the other one that I wanted to show you, where did my focus and execute go here? And that one seems to have gone down, so I'm going to log back in here. Oops. Give me 1 second. I'm going to see if it's in another. It seems to have logged out. Okay, so I'll come back to this one because I don't want to spend your time trying to reopen this. But the other one that I had looked at is the customer concern database. So that's the other piece that the community should own, in that the leaders of the communities have access to something called Focus and Execute. And in Focus and Execute, every community for their assisted living is supposed to have 2 action plans. And so those action plans are, what specifically am I doing to improve my customer service score? And so when I went in there to look to see where we're at with that and how people are doing in their progress, I did notice of the 4 that I checked, 1 of them does not have any actions around improving their willingness to recommend. So again, with a lot of new leaders, what you want to look at is, what were your last year's scores? What were people concerned about? And what have you done about it? And then make sure that they know what you've done about it. So in this one, they didn't really have any plans, or at least haven't documented plans. And other ones, they had a plan, they updated it, but they're not necessarily on track. So you're going to want to look at that and say, okay, what do I need to do to get this back on track? Because the new surveys are going to come out in spring. We only have a month or two before they're going to be surveyed again, and we've got to get that score up. So we want to know what people were concerned about in the past. We want to tell them what we've done about it. Don't just assume they know. Give them feedback. We heard you. This is what we've done. Remind them of what you've done. And it's still not too late to make any changes to address, and make sure that you've got a plan around improving that customer service score. And so this one, so 2 out of the 4 didn't have any plans whatsoever. One of them had one action item, which is good, but they didn't have the second. That's why they got a partial. But again, it's updated and it's on track. And with that, they should see some changes in the responsiveness to their tenants, and hopefully that will improve their score. So that is, again, in focus and execute. So take a look at that. If you do not have access to it, talk to your executive director. They're the ones with access. Okay. The last one was making sure that the care and service is appropriate. So the only way to do that is to make sure we're doing appropriate evaluations to address their needs, and that we're making sure that our team is meeting these needs. And how we do that is we make sure that the aides or the nurses or whoever's doing the care is documenting that they provided the care. That shows that they can see what the care is and that they did it. And we're getting a lot of grades, which is great. And Linda's going to talk more about this in a little bit, but we still have everybody who's read is currently working on an action plan, which is the Madonnas and Nazareth. So they're working hard. They've got an action plan on that. But there's a lot of you who are still in the yellow. So Linda sends this out on the 1st of every month. So you'll see in 3 days how you are, actually, no, tomorrow, because it's February. You'll see tomorrow how you're doing on this. And if you're not green, make sure that you've got a plan around getting that to green. Any questions on that? Okay, so look for that from Linda tomorrow. It comes out without faith. So if you don't see that in your inbox, reach out so we can check to see why you are not receiving it. Okay, any questions on those so far? So again, that's something we talk about every single month. So really, because we've been talking about this for almost a year and reviewing it every month, there really shouldn't be any reds on any of these guys. So if you need help, if you don't understand what to do, reach out. We're here to help you. Okay. So the next section here is kind of learning from experience. Often I have questions that I think are good questions that I bring to everybody because I think it would be a good knowledge, but this one is actually learning from experience that one of our communities has had. So one of our communities had a gentleman in the memory care who was quite creative and broke every lock on the window and was on multiple windows and was able to get out one of them. And when that occurred, there was some turnover in staff, like we've all had, right? And not everybody knew what they were supposed to do in that circumstance. And so I just want to remind you, kind of learning from experience, let's make sure that we're all prepared, right? Whether you have, I mean, it's mostly if you have a memory care, but sometimes in your assisted living, I've seen people get a little confused, maybe go out in the winter. I've seen that multiple times. So it really should be, if you're in assisted living at all, which all of you are, you want to make sure you have a missing resident plan. You have an emergency disaster book. In that emergency disaster book template, it does have a piece around what will you do if you have a missing resident. So you want to look at that emergency disaster plan. You want to make sure that it includes what would happen if somebody gets lost from assisted living, not just the nursing home, right? It's also in the Minnesota AL policies, and it is a requirement that you have a missing resident plan. And for all of you, you should include it in your orientation so that everybody knows what to do if somebody's missing, who needs to be contacted, what the process is. So make sure you've got the plan, make sure you educate your staff on the plan, and then do drills. Just like you would do a fire drill, do missing resident drills. Make sure everybody knows what their role is in that particular situation. And then I would encourage you to check your environment, particularly around memory care. This particular building, the same windows exist in a different building. So we were able to call that building and say, hey, check your windows. We think we need to do some changes for you as well. So, look at your environment. Are there areas of vulnerability? Do you have doors with alarms on them? What is the scenario? Okay, any questions on that? All right. The other learning experience, this just happened at Living Community at St. Joe's. We were talking about this one, and it also happened at Shakopee in a mock survey. And that our disaster planning, when you talk to people, you say, oh yeah, we have a campus of disaster planning. But when you look at the plan, it really isn't. So the disaster planning should include your entire campus. It doesn't matter if it's a reg or not, right, guys? I mean, CMS does require that the nursing home have a plan, a pretty extensive plan. In Minnesota, the regs say that they are the exact same regs. So Minnesota has to follow the federal guidelines, Appendix C. But in the other states, it really doesn't matter if it's a reg. If there's an emergency, you want to know what to do, right? You want to be prepared. And so look at your disaster plan. If you're assuming it's a community plan, then make sure it truly addresses the assisted living. So it could have a separate risk assessment, right? If it's a separate building or a separate piece of the building, or one was built 20 years ago and one was built last year, the risks are going to be different. So you probably want a different risk assessment for each part of your community. Some areas may have to have a separate plan. So again, if I'm the administrator of Shakopee, Windermere Way is a mile down the road, and my resources in a disaster are going to be different at Windermere Way than they are at St. Gert's that's attached to the nursing home. So you just want to make sure that you've addressed all your unique environments. The same thing with Madonna. Madonna, you've got 4 different buildings. Do you know what to do in each building, and is the plan different in those buildings? So an example of that would be Nazareth in their assisted living. If there is a fire, they are supposed to go to an area of refuge and wait for the fire department. And there's supposed to be a communication there that goes to a phone that is answered 24/7. So whoever is carrying that phone at Nazareth needs to know what an area of refuge is and what they should do if they get a call. And that's very different than whoever is in the nursing home in the process there. Another example in Nazareth is that if you're in the independent living, they leave on their own, right? So do they know what they're supposed to do and where they're supposed to go? And an independent living, like, how do you know, did everybody get out, right? Those sorts of questions. So it's going to be different depending on what your campus is. Any questions on that? Okay, and Minnesota, we'll talk a little bit more about this later, our plan for you, but in particular, take a look at that, because that is one of the top citations for Minnesota. All right, finance. Okay, can you see an Adobe document? Linda, can you see this?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay, so this is the Benedictine operational summary with the funds that we have been receiving for COVID. It's got sections in here that are without, but we're just gonna skip past that. So basically in the operating income, we lost $727,000 last month. And so over $1 million swing here. And year to date, we are off of budget by 7.5 million in operations, which is what we on this call can control. In other non-operation, most of this is our investments. It looks like the investments were down that month. And as Kevin always says, we don't panic when it goes down because we don't celebrate when it goes up. So, but that year to date is about $4 million off. And so in total, we're about $12 million off or a loss of $10 million. So there is good news as they go forward here though. So if you look at this, this is the operating income. And this is how we did through COVID, and you can see a positive tick. And even in December, we had a positive here. So that's a good thing. We're turning the tide here. The average census, you can see, is got a slow tick up in both the nursing homes and the assisted livings. And the premium payers in the nursing homes is a huge uptick. So several of our communities in Minnesota have what we call a decompression unit. And so this is where the state is helping them to staff, because our biggest issue in the nursing home side from the census and the premium payer is we had to hold admissions because we didn't have enough staff. So with the state assisting us with staff, we were able to accept admissions and bring that census back up. And so I think that, you know, that's going to be a really positive thing, even though some of those are now ending. It really helped us in the right trajectory. Also, several of our communities, though it's hard to raise prices, have put in multiple steps to address wages and such. And so again, with new staff coming on board, hopefully we can see that trend continue. You can see where it's kind of coming into play here. This is group 3. So you can see of the month of the $740,000, group 3 accounted for 622. So again, this just shows that things are not as gloomy as one may perceive, because group 3 is the new communities, it's the new buildings. So they were already slated to lose money, they're losing more money. But as you'll see, those are really coming on board. 2 of those, most obviously, Windermere Way and Northfield. Hodan, I think you're on, I believe, and Ken, I believe you are above budget right now as far as census, right? I'm pretty sure they are. And Windermere Way already has 3 new admissions scheduled for March. So again, I think we're going to see some changes. We still need to be very diligent because we got a lot to make up. And then again, you can see the investment income here, as I talked about before. A lot of that's coming from the investment income. So this is without COVID. We're not even going to look at that because it's not a reality that we have to face because we have COVID health. And again, this is just showing we already expected Windermere Way to lose almost $2 million. Yes, they are losing almost 3, but they are turning the tide. They've got lots of brand new leaders there that are looking really good. Lots of new admissions, new sales folks. Down here is Regina. Again, Regina now has a decompression unit. They had a lot of really significant staffing challenges down there. Brianna's been doing a phenomenal job and getting some new leaders on board, addressing wages. And she is, that community does have a decompression unit. So, though I think it's ending soon, but so there is a plan in place there. And then St. Joe's is another one that's there, and that too has new leadership on board, almost a full team, a new executive director that just started. So I'm really seeing things turn around at St. Joe's as well. So I think, yes?
What does that mean for us though? I mean, what do you want to do? There's a lockdown now, or?
So somebody's mute yourself.
I think Brianna Sturm is talking. Maybe she needs to mute, please.
Unless you want to talk to us.
I'm gonna jump.
Sorry.
That's
Brittany
all
says hello, Linda Johnson.
right. Okay, so anyway, even though the financials look, oh my gosh, it's, like you said, when you really break it down into this, we have to be diligent, we have to get our census up, but it's not the time to panic. There's a lot of good work going on right now. And then I just want to show you this as well. So this is housing specific, where we were to make $216,000 last month, and we lost 174. So every single one of us needs to focus on it to help the whole. But again, here's some positive news here. So here's the ministry partners, and you can see that they net income from operations 310, which is a positive variance of $195,000. So that tide is turning. So we can do this, guys. This is not something that's going to be a permanent reality for us. Any questions on the financials? Okay. So some process reminders. So I'm going to have Linda talk about the first two. Or the second one, the med checks on Matrix as a reminder.
Yep, so we're just seeing a lot of, and maybe I can share my screen, Penny. Thanks. And hi, Brittany. We're just seeing a lot of med errors recently coming up, and you know, we have that quality program that we started with senior living, where the actual nurse comes in and does that quality check on the unlicensed staff giving meds. The residents and families are paying for this service. Again, we're not always providing it. We're skipping it as we think it's not important. And just want to make sure that that is part of our weekly routine in all states, that we guarantee those families that we do a supervision by the licensed nurse, not only setting up meds, but doing that quality check. So when you're picking this question for the med treatment setups, you're changing this care by to the licensed nurse. You're picking what day of the week works for your nurse, and then put it a little bit later in the day so that the aides don't sign off on that. And make sure you're picking these quick notes. This does build the med management plan. We have a lot of it already in the service plan for you, but if there's special things about that person's med management, are we putting them in a med box weekly? And then they self-administer. Those are things that we need to describe here in these notes. And then when you are taking that box the next week to fill again for them to self-administer, you're gonna see if they missed any meds. Do they need more education? Did we follow up with the MD that they missed the medications? Same as if they have cards. We would be checking those cards, and all cards should be dated and initialed each time they punch that card, because when you're going back for the week and you're doing this med check, you can easily see if that aide missed a medication from that card. It gives you more follow-up. You also want to note here on that second med note, if there's any special storage of meds, you need to put it in here. Insulin is kept in fridge till use, whatever it is, where they're kept. You want to put all the details of that medication setup in this area, because this is building your med management plan, especially for Minnesota. You're meeting those regulations in this area. And then there's a reminder that this is a weekly service by the nurse, not the resident assistants. It is not for the medication administration. You should not have this scheduling 3 times a day. You should only have this 1 time a week where the nurse has to go sign it. And again, they sign it in Care Assist. When you go in and you log in as the nurse, and we'll quickly log into Care Assist. And if I'm the nurse and I'm going to use my EMR, I am going to go to my to-do list. I gotta move your picture, sorry. And I'm gonna come to the to-do list, and I'm going to change my view over to the task grouping, because now it's grouped by that task, and I can quickly go down and look for those med treatments. And I should be able to see who is due today for me, the nurse, to go and follow up and see if I'm doing that quality check, making sure I have enough meds for the week so we never run out. Verifying that narcotic count, very important. And mischarting, and making sure that everything is accounted for. You guys have
I have
any
a question.
questions?
It says, is this the same thing you have set up every Tuesday from Diane Grove?
I don't know if it's every Tuesday at your facility. It's just whatever your med set treatments are. So you can go to your to-do list, Diane, and pull it up and you can see if that is what your day is. I'm not sure facility wise, each facility makes it whatever's convenient for your facility. But this is what the nurse is doing off the to-do list, these med treatment checks.
And your building's a pretty big building, Diane, so I would assume they're not all on the same day.
Yep, some people do Monday through Friday, some people do them all in one day. It just depends what your staffing is, but this is something that is very important that we keep going weekly because it will keep your med errors down. And I think we're having a few communities that are really struggling right now, and it's because they're not catching those aids. Another thing then, if you have med errors, make sure you're following up with the supervision and watching them pass meds after you've noted the error as part of your follow-up with that staff. You can use your supervision of staff form. It's a great tool to use when they've, made a mistake, or, you want to make sure that you documented that you did your teaching and then you followed up and watched them pass the meds and they corrected their error. And that would go into their personnel file. Great thing to use for your annual reviews.
And if there is a med error, I know some of the RNSs and Leslie are on, so correct me if I'm wrong, but the med errors should go into ROMP.
Yep, and we're gonna make a new form for senior living for med errors so we can document in the clinical record. That was a decision that we decided to move forward with, and I should have that done by the end of the week. So look for that and I'll send out a notice when it's completed. So just like a fall, you have a med error, you'll go to forms and pull that up and fill that out, and then you would do a ROP.
Leslie or team, anything to add there? No? Then you must have done a good job, Linda. Okay, you want to unshare your screen? Okay, can you see my PowerPoint again? Linda?
I'm sorry, what, Penny?
Can you see the PowerPoint again?
Yes, now I can, sorry.
Good, okay. And then the other thing is obviously
Okay, fine.
the point of care compliance that's coming out
Do
tomorrow.
they have any concerns
Okay,
about the formula he's using?
okay. Just wanted to roll that out.
Yeah. And then, so yeah, the stomach flu apparently has been raging through and been a
Somebody's
real
tapping.
terror.
Who could that be? Is that Josh? Looks like Josh is not on mute. Okay, and then the last thing again is the person-centered wellness plan. That is in Matrix. That is the document that asks the person about themselves. As a reminder, regardless of your state rules, and whether you should do an evaluation, this should be done once the person is admitted. And then you should take a look on day 10 or day 14, whatever you have set up with Linda, to take a look at that eval and adjust it, adjust the service dates and plans. So you want to look at that person-centered wellness. I'm still seeing that the wellness form is getting done, but what's confusing people is when Linda trains the nurse, especially in a state where this is mandated. 3 of our states or 2 of our states, the person-centered wellness is mandatory. So this form is mandatory. And so what ends up happening is the nurse opens the evaluation, but we haven't had a chance to do the form. So what Linda counsels people on is put their name in and then close the form, okay? And then what I'm seeing is sometimes that's it, that it ends there. So we want to make sure that that's not the end. We want to make sure that during that initial period, whoever's assigned to do that form completes the form, and then the nurse goes in on day 10 or day 14 and reviews it and then adjusts the service plan. So that's the piece that I'm missing, is that here's who I am, here's what I want you to do about it, and here's how my service plan is adjusted for my personal needs. And that's the piece that we're missing. And then every 90 days, if there's any changes in services, or maybe a change in the person's wishes, the nurse should just say, hey, has anything changed? Do we need to update that form? Or are your personal desires and schedules the same, right? And you can have wellness go back and do that every 90 days instead of the nurse, but either way, it should be triggered to say, are your wishes and desires the same? And that's the piece that I'm seeing is missing, is that kind of follow through into the service plan, and or they're not actually filling out the form, they're just putting in the day. So Linda, anything to add to that?
Nope. I know people ask like how we know they're reviewed annually, and I'm just not really quite sure how to make that happen, other than nursing and wellness communicate. And if you're doing the annual med review, maybe that's something that will make it annual med review and activity review. But more to come on that. We'll figure something out.
And so again, this section is just a reminder of processes. So hopefully this communication is not new, but again, I know we have a lot of new leaders, so we're here to help if you're confused by any of this. So the other thing that's really important that is that with that form that we use, that our activities reflect this. So the housing leaders on the call, I'd like you to look at some of those forms. What are they saying in these people? What are these people saying as their preferences? And do your activities reflect that? And if not, partner with the head of your wellness or activity program to look at what you would need to do differently in order to make that happen. And your activity should also be age and activity level appropriate. So consider the physical and the mental capability. So for example, we're talking seniors here, most of them 75 plus, probably can't thread a needle because they can't see it or have dexterity. But you can get pre-threaded needles and they can still make quilts, right? Coding a new computer language, probably not something a 75-year-old wants to learn. However, how to use Facebook so I can talk to my grandchildren, they'd probably be all over that, right? So, you know, I always talk about this. There's nothing wrong with bingo. Everybody loves it. So do I. But these folks are younger, active, vital people, and you want to make sure that you're looking at what they're telling you and that your activities are appropriate to what they're saying, their interests are, their needs, and their goals. It's also, if you've got somebody with some great skills, get them to volunteer to lead some groups in that great skill, right? The other thing is that activities should be varied in hours and they should occur daily. This doesn't mean that you have to staff your activity department 24/7, 7 days a week. This is, again, by knowing who your people are, by preparing things for your resident assistants, you can do this without activity people being there. The residents can run the meetings, the activity or the RAs can run. In Minnesota, it is a requirement that activities occur daily. It is required. So I'd like you guys to go back and look at your activity schedule and make sure it's reflecting that, even if it's setting it up through other resources and not the activity staff.
Penny?
Yes, ma'am.
There was a question, is there a recommendation of how to get the information on the wellness form to the aides? Should the nurse transfer the info to the service plan? Anything relevant that you find in that wellness form, you can plug into certain areas on the wellness question, you know, throughout your service plan. If it has to do with things they like during their bath, bedtimes, how they wear their hair, you can incorporate that all somewhere into the service plan. And also the question on that wellness form, you can put in notes, anything pertinent that may not fit anywhere else. So if you want to give them a little history, you could copy and paste and put it right under that question, right in the wellness questionnaire question on notes.
Yeah.
So you're making it work, but also the communication from your activity staff, just talking to your staff about what they found out. You know, we can do a lot of verbal things also. Doesn't
And-
all have to be written.
Yep, and what I've recommended to people, because everybody should be orientated. If I want to sleep till 10 o'clock and I want you to hold my breakfast, culinary needs to know that. Housekeeping needs to know not to come in and clean my room at 8:30. So, you know, so I always recommend that the part of the morning stand-up, whether it's with the big group or a separate group for housing, that there is an orientation to this person by whoever filled out. And that way everybody's aware of what are their preferences and what do we need to do about it. Several communities, just because of the turnover and the line staff not being in the stand-up, actually print it up and put it in a book so that people, when I'm a new aide or I'm a new aide on a different unit, I can actually look at that and read the wellness so that I can get to know that person. The other thing that isn't a reg, but I'm going to ask you guys to pretend it is. So this is kind of a challenge. Exercise is critical to health, critical. And so I really would like to make sure that everybody has access to daily exercise. So again, it could be a spot where they can pop in an exercise video and do it themselves on a chair. It could be a big group exercise. There's a million ways that you can get this done. But I really do, I'm not seeing enough exercise. It's not universally. There are certain of you out there that rock at this. But I know several of you who don't have an exercise room that this is an area of opportunity. So daily, I'm just challenging you. Daily exercise would be great.
Good.
Any other questions on that? And can you see who's not on mute? Please.
Cindy, can you mute yours, please?
Cindy? Thank you. Okay, so going on to our dashboard, there's two different operational dashboards. So again, you would go up to applications and then you just click on, you just type in dashboard. That's how you get here. And this is the operational dashboard. I've narrowed it down to just assisted living. We're doing really good on safety index. This is falls and med errors. But again, you have to report them in order to be included in this. So let's hope that this is correct. They pulled this from the ROMP, so make sure that information is going into the ROMP. Spiritual opportunities. Again, in the spring, we are going to redo the assisted living survey. It's going to be, I believe it's going to be a homegrown survey this year, but your assisted living folks are going to be filling that out. Make sure they're aware of what those spiritual opportunities are. Let's talk it up. Let's listen to them if we need to make any other adjustments. So that we can get, you know, at 39.7, that this should be a real easy way to increase this. You know, the spiritual care leaders are back in the buildings, should be good. Again, assisted living, willingness to recommend, these both are once a year measures. So let's make sure we do it right. Talk it up, hold forums, let them know it's coming, encourage them to do the survey. There'll be more coming on that. Associate engagement index, so a little opportunity here. 90-day retention is looking good. Retention over 12 months, a little opportunity. Make sure we're checking in with our staff, seeing how they're doing. Time to fill remains an opportunity. I think some of the adjustments that Tia, Jen, Steve, and all the leaders have been doing in salaries hopefully will help that. Okay. And then this is just the performance measures or Benedictine, which is actually, which reflects very similar on how we're doing. Time to fill, resident recommend is pretty much the same. The only thing different is that there's census here, and we've already talked about that a little bit. But we do have good news on that as well, because this is our census trending for housing, and it includes all of us. And you can see a nice, slow, but steady, but sure uptick. So keep it going, guys. Great job there. Any questions on that? All right. So the next 9 minutes, I need Minnesota to please hang on. Before we hang up, any questions from anybody else? All right, well, have a wonderful day to all of our other states here. Okay, so Minnesota, want to tell you some stuff that's been happening to help you guys out. About last June, we did a 2-day training on the new regulations and the conversion to assisted living in Minnesota. A majority of you were not here last June. So we really need to help you to prepare for the surveys. We've had surveys, but not the annual. I'm not aware that any of us have actually had our annual yet. But several of our colleagues in other companies have. And Leading Age is also sending out the results of the surveys. And there's a fair amount of tags out there. And those tags can be associated with fines. And so we really feel as we and we also did a mock survey at Windermere Way, and again, made us realize that, here's where this is located and here's how you find this is not obvious to all of you. The other thing that we learned is there was an interim director of nursing there who it was her first time working in assisted living. And she just really didn't know where to look because we hadn't even had a chance to train her. And so, once we were able to show it, she then knew. And when they went to do St. Gert's, we did much better on that. So I think it's just really important that we hold your hand and give you as much success as possible. So we're actually creating a survey book and populating as much of it as we possibly can, so it's turnkey. And then highlighting what you need to put in there to make sure you're ready for that survey. Last week or 2 weeks ago now, I think, Mary Glatt created a wonderful readiness checklist. That checklist covered a lot of the clinical that you need to know. We've expanded that a little bit to include some of the administrative things, just a little bit. So if you've already started working on Mary's checklist as far as preparing, keep going, but know that in your training, we're going to give you a little bit more of an expanded checklist. We also want to walk you through the survey book, where to find the policies. We've reworked eSource to make it a one-stop shop. We want to show you all of that. So it's right now, I've got it slated for 4 hours, or I think 3.5. We're meeting with the RNSs. So Linda and I have been working on this. We've been taking the lead, but we've been partnering with the RNSs and Leslie on this, and kind of going back and forth during email. So we're gonna give the training information to them, see how many questions they have, see after that what we think the timing should be, which is why right now those invites just say hold. So we may adjust the timing a little bit. But I invited you to a meeting on the 9th and the 11th. So it's pick one or the other. They're both the exact same content. So you can pick up half of it on one day and half on the other, or pick one or the other, whichever one you choose. But just keep the holds on for now. And again, I wanted to get it on your calendar because I want to get this in your hands before the surveys show up at your door. Know that these tools are out there. So God forbid, if somebody shows up at your door this week, reach out to us and we can send it to you. So in the meantime, though, one of the biggest things that people are getting cited on is not knowing the regs. That is a citation if you don't know those regs. So please, there's other essential readings, but please start with 144G. And so again, I'll just show you really easy how simple this is. You just type in Google 144G Minnesota. And I think it would come up even if I didn't pick Minnesota. And you click on this. And it's also an eSource, and I can show you where it is at the eSource. And it's right, you just click PDF and it'll just print the whole thing and you can read it right off your computer. You can also go to eSource. And you can go to Policy Library, Housing, Minnesota, Compliance Policy Tools, so things to help you. And you can see required readings for LALD. But if you're a DON, you need to know that, and if you look in here, the two that you're going to be checked on is 144G and where is it? It should be in here. It somehow got wiped out. The vulnerable adult reporting. So I'll make sure that that's in there. I'm not sure what happened to it. It was there yesterday. So get started on that, and then we'll cover more of what's in here on our calls. All righty. Oops. The other thing that I wanted to point out to you is that in May, the new licensure renewal documents will be coming to you. And there is a fine if you file for your renewal of your assisted living license late. And you have to file 60 days ahead of time. So your license will terminate on August 1st, I believe. And if you back that up, it means you have to apply by June 1st. So they're coming out in May, so that doesn't give us a lot of time. So what's going to really slow this down is if your email is not listed with the state or with Belts as the person responsible for this building. So you want to make sure that your license, your LALD, is associated with this community, so you get that notice. Okay, so just double check on that, please. All right. And EduCare, just a little FYI, as you assign people your dementia training in order to meet the compliance of the dementia training for Minnesota, the EduCare, you can pick or assign EduCare Dementia Series AA Recognized Course Bundle, and that will meet the requirements for EduCare. So if you can make sure that whoever is assigning your EduCare modules knows this, and that if they have any questions, to contact Kathleen Murray. Okay. And that's all I have. Any questions on that?
No, but I have one thing.
Yes, ma'am.
Don't forget when you're filling out the questions in the evaluation, you cannot put NA or leave blank any of those questions in the beginning of the Minnesota evaluation. That's your visits. Maybe I can share my screen real quick,
Yep.
Penny.
Yep, I'm sorry, I forgot, Linda, that
No,
you.
that's fine. I just want to make sure that we were answering each question in the evaluation under that first section. Let me get off all the communities here. And I think a lot of times we're answering not applicable or whatever, but that sheet that I gave you how to do the assessment has all the questions that you need, that you could take this right in with you with the resident, but you can't leave these blank. You have to, answer which assessment you're doing. If they're in a memory care, make sure you answer 5 because you have to do the BIMs. You need to put the vitals in. You need to put the weight in and state if there's a gain or loss. You need to review psychotropic meds and you need to list what they are. You need to ask the resident, what is their sleep pattern? You can't say NA. You have to know what is their sleep pattern if there's been a change. There are quick notes if they answer the same way is fine. You have to review infections. You have to answer the question. You have to say none recent or none in the last year, or mention what the infection was. But these are all questions that have to be answered. And then at the very end, under that new vulnerable adult, the IAPP section, answer all 4 of these. Click on each one, and if there's none, right, you don't suspect any sexual abuse, which, you know, hopefully our residents don't, but you might want to say all staff have annual training and are mandated reporters. So if something like that happened, but I would write none noted or none suspected, or, and then everyone could be susceptible to physical abuse in an assisted living. I mean, they're in a vulnerable state. We have phone solicitors for financial. So you want to answer all 4 and then, you know, use these quick notes and make sure the self-abuse is really, there are so many people that we're missing that either don't eat or refuse cares, or, you know, it doesn't mean they have to accept our care, but we have to mention it here. So it's very important that we're looking at these 4 areas. They're going to really zoom in on 170 to 173. Don't leave them blank.
And Linda, you have a question. I don't always know their medications when they do their own.
Then you would write that resident self-administers unknown meds. If we're not administering their meds and we're not managing, we won't know. And it's okay to say it, just don't leave the question blank. That's what they're stating. We're leaving things blank.
And then I know if you leave it blank, it doesn't necessarily show up on the printed up service plan. So it looks like we didn't cover that. So.
This is all about your assessment. These first few
There's a
questions.
pre-assessment that you have to do on every person before they come into the building, whether they are on services or not. Because they can refuse that assessment and say, no, I don't want services, then it would trigger to the vulnerability assessment by the housing manager. But anybody who wants services has to have that form filled out, and that's where you get the information to complete this. That's what starts it. And then you finish it here. And the pre-assessment, let me just show you again. We're going to cover all this on the training, but I just want to show you really quick. Well, actually, we're over time. I'll show you. So, join the training. Okay, anything else? Any other questions? All right, I thank you for hanging on late. You guys are wonderful.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day. Bye.